Hi, Jada. All right. So, basically the big push today, right, is we need to finish up your standard of living research document. Um, and so we have a few things that we're going to go over for that. There's a crash course we're going to watch. So we'll get to that. Remember, we're talking about globalization and how it has, impacted various aspects of, economic growth, labor markets, rights of citizens, environment, resources, income distribution. So basically the standard of living, right? So our bell ringer for today is National Burrito Day. What is your favorite kind of burrito? I will tell you, I love breakfast burritos. And I'm not sure if it's just because it's breakfast burritos or the fact that I just like breakfast food. Cheese and bean. Okay. One of my students earlier today said, they're like, I like it just bean and cheese, and it's just a purist. And so I was like, oh, okay. I hadn't thought of it of that way, but yeah, that makes sense. I've had a lot of carne asada. That's been brought up today. One of my students told me that whatever they're eating, if there's a tortilla near, they're going to shove it in a tortilla and make it a burrito. I've had that so far today as well. Anybody else? Anything else that you might like or enjoy? Oh, lettuce. Okay. I never thought about putting lettuce in my burritos, Kayla. But I mean, that makes sense, right? If I eat like a bowl that has all that in there and just put it into a tortilla. Really, Makai? Not at all, huh? Okay. Anybody else? No? All right. Okay. I guess we'll move on. Okay, so today's agenda, we have a crash course video on income and wealth inequality. I always do this video with standard of living because it really does talk about some of those different indicators, like those 4 that you needed to add to your project. If you have not already done so, you're going to finish and turn in your standard of living research project. And we're going to go over that because some have been turned in, and in your charts are just some random numbers that don't really make sense. And I'm not seeing how they're helping you figure out the standard of living. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we have some open work. And so remember, I told you today would be a makeup or catch-up day. So we have like your life of a t-shirt that is still open until the 11th. That's a summative. The EverFi IPO, that's open until the 11th. That is also a summative. The module 9 lesson 7 quiz is open until the 14th. That is a summative. And then, of course, our standard of living project that we've been doing this week, that also is a summative. And then, so all your summatives, 90% of your grade. And then the module 9, lesson 7 notebook and course arc are the formatives. And I know they're only 10%, but you definitely don't want to leave a 0 even in that column because that can still help your grade. We do have some get ahead if you want to get ahead, and it's the EverFi investment game and the EverFi keys to investment. Those are the last 2 lessons in the marketplace program that are going to be due next week. And in fact, that's what you'll be working on Tuesday, I believe, and Wednesday. So if you want to get ahead, we can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the crash course video, and then I'm going to do just a quick little reminder on the EverFi, and then we'll get into the standard of living research project. Is that good? Can I get a thumbs up if you guys are, if that works for you? Awesome. Okay. And of course, as always, I'm going to mute my microphone while the crash course is playing. Let me hit mute, and then I'll play the video.
Welcome to Crash Course Economics. I'm Jacob Clifford.
And I'm Adrienne Hill. The world is full of inequality. There's racial inequality, gender inequality, health, education, political inequality, and of course, economic inequality. Some people are rich and some people are poor, and it can seem pretty impossible to fix.
Well, maybe not. So there are two main types of economic inequality: wealth inequality and income inequality. Wealth is accumulated assets minus liabilities, so it's the value of stuff like savings, pensions, real estate, and stocks. When we talk about wealth inequality, we're basically talking about how assets are distributed. Income is the new earnings that are constantly being added to that pile of wealth. So when we talk about income inequality, we're talking about how that new stuff is getting distributed. The point is, they're not the same. Let's go to the thought bubble.
Let's look at both types of inequality at the global level. Global wealth today is estimated at about $260 trillion and is not distributed equally. One study shows that North America and Europe, while they have less than 20% of the world's population, have 67% of the world's wealth. China, which has more people than North America and Europe combined, has only about 8% of the wealth. India and Africa.
So basically what they're talking about, you know, when they do GDP per capita, and that is the gross domestic product divided by the number of people in a country, some countries look like they have better GDP per capita than other countries because, you know, maybe they have less people, you know, they're selling more stuff. And yet when you start looking at other indicators like the wealth in a country, outside of the GDP per capita, is completely different. Kind of that idea. That's why I wanted you guys to pick 4 more indicators in addition to the GDP per capita.
Africa together make up almost 30% of the population, but only share about 2% of the world's wealth. We're teaching economics, so we can focus on income inequality. These 10 people represent everyone on the planet, and they're lined up according to income. Poorest over here and richest over here. This group represents the poorest 20%. This is the second poorest 20%, the middle 20%, and so on. If we distributed $100 based on current income trends, this group would get about 83 of those dollars. The next richest group would get $10. The middle gets 4. The second poorest group would get $2. And the poorest 20% of humans would get $1. Branko Milanovic, an economist that specializes in inequality, explained all this by describing an economic Big Bang. At first, countries' incomes were all bunched together, but with the Industrial Revolution, the differences exploded. It pushed some countries forward onto the path to higher incomes, while others stayed where they had been for millennia. According to Milanovic, in 1820, the richest countries in the world, Great Britain and the Netherlands, were only 3 times richer than the poorest, like India and China. Today, the gap between the richest and poorest nations is like 100 to 1. The gaps are getting bigger and bigger. Thanks, Thought Bubble. The Industrial Revolution created a lot of inequality between countries, but today globalization and international trade are accelerating it. Most economists agree that globalization has helped the world's poorest people, but it's also helped the rich a lot more. Harvard economist Richard Freeman noted, "The triumph of globalization and market capitalism has improved living standards for billions, while concentrating billions among the few." So it's kind of a mixed bag. The very poor are doing a little better, but the very rich are now a lot richer than everybody else. There are other reasons inequality is growing. Economists point to something called skill-biased technological change. The jobs created in modernized economies are more technology-based. generally requiring new skills. Workers that have the education and skills to do those jobs thrive, while others are left behind. So in a way, technology's become a complement for skilled workers, but a replacement for many unskilled workers. The end result is an ever-widening gap between not just the poor and the rich, but also the poor and the working class. As economies develop and as manufacturing jobs move overseas, low-skill, low-pay, and high-skill, high-pay work are the only jobs left. People with few skills fall behind in terms of income. In the last 30 years in the US, the number of college-educated people living in poverty has doubled from 3% to 6%, which is bad. And then consider that during the same period of time, the number of people living in poverty with a high school degree has risen from 6% to a whopping 22%. Over the last 50 years, the salary of college graduates has continued to grow, while after adjusting for inflation, high school graduates' incomes have actually dropped. It's a good reason to stay in school. There are other reasons the income gap is widening. The reduced influence of unions, tax policies that favor the wealthy, and the fact that somehow it's okay for CEOs to make salaries many, many times greater than those of their employees. Also, race and gender and other forms of inequality can exacerbate income inequality.
Let's dive into the data for the United States. We'll start by mentioning Max Lorenz, who created a graph to show income inequality. Along the bottom, we have the percent of households from 0 to 100%. Along the side, we have the percent share of income. By the way, we're using households rather than just looking at individuals because many households have 2 income earners. So this straight line right here represents perfect income equality. So every household earns the same income. And while perfect income equality might look nice on the surface, it's not really the goal. When different jobs have different incomes, people have an incentive to become a doctor or an entrepreneur or a YouTube star. You know, the job society really values. So this graph, called the Lorenz curve, helps visualize the depth of inequality. Now, for 2010, the US Census Bureau found that the poorest 20% of Americans made 3.3% of the income, and the richest 20% made over 50% of the income, so that's pretty unequal. But has it always been like this? Well, in 1970, the bottom group earned 4.1% of the income, and the top earned 43.3%. By 1990, things were even less equal, so the 2010 numbers are just a continuation of the trend. And it isn't just the poorest group that's losing ground. Over those 40 years, each of the bottom groups, or 80% of households, earn smaller and smaller shares of the total income. Now, from the Lorenz curve, we can calculate the most commonly used measure of income inequality, the Gini index. Now, without jumping into too much of the math, it's basically the size of the gap between the equal distribution of income and the actual distribution. Now, 0 represents complete equality, and 100 represents complete inequality. Now, you might be surprised to learn the US doesn't have the highest income inequality, but it does have the highest among Western industrialized nations. The UK has the highest in the EU.
The debate over income inequality isn't about whether it exists. It obviously does. The fight is over whether it's a problem and what should be done about it. Let's start with those who don't think it's a big deal. They'd tell you that the data suggests that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, but that might not be the case. Instead, it could be that all the groups are making more money, but the richest share is just growing faster. Like, let's say you own an apple tree and we pick 10 apples. You keep 6 and give me 4. A week later, we pick 20 apples. You take 15 and give me 5. So my share of the total went down from 40% to 25%, but each of us still got more apples. So it's true that people in the lowest income bracket have earned a little more money in the last 40 years, but in the last 20 years, that average income has been falling. Meanwhile, the rich have continually gotten richer. So what's the richest guy on earth have to say about it? Bill Gates said, yes, some level of inequality is built into capitalism. It's inherent to the system. The question is, what level of inequality is acceptable? And when does inequality start doing more harm than good? There's a growing group of economists who believe income inequality in the US today is doing more harm. They argue that greater income inequality is associated with a lot of problems. They point to studies that show countries with more inequality have more violence, drug abuse, and incarcerations. Income inequality also dilutes political equality, since the rich have a disproportionate say in what policies move forward, and the rich have an incentive to promote policies that benefit the rich. So how do we address this inequality? There's not a lot of agreement on this. Some argue that education is the key to reducing the gap. Basically, workers with more and better education tend to have the skills that earn higher income. Some economists push for an increased minimum wage, which we're going to talk about in another episode. There's even an argument that access to affordable, high-quality childcare would go a long way. And some think government should do more to provide a social safety net, focus on getting more people to work, and adjust the tax code to redistribute income.
Some economists call for the government to increase income taxes and capital gains taxes on the rich. Income taxes in the US are already somewhat progressive, which means that there are tax brackets that require the rich to pay a higher percent of income. Right now it peaks at around 40%, but some economists call for increases up to 50 or 60%. One idea is to fix loopholes that the rich use to avoid paying taxes. Other economists argue that taxing the rich won't be as effective as reducing regulation and bureaucratic red tape. It's unclear which path we're going to take, but extreme income inequality at the national and global level needs to be addressed. Motivation to improve income inequality may come from a genuine desire to help people and level the playing field, or the fear of Hunger Games style social upheaval. But either way, the issue can't be ignored.
Even Adam Smith, the most classical of classical economists, said no society can surely be flourishing and happy, of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, so hopefully if some of you guys were feeling like, you weren't quite sure, maybe you were feeling a little like, oh, I don't know about my indicators. Hopefully that just kind of gave you a little bit more food for thought in regards to that. Let me go back to our slides. Okay. All right. So let's just kind of, before I get into the standard of living, let me really quickly go back to the EverFi, just because I want to make sure for those of you who decide to move forward, or any of you that have had, gotten the message from me that you need to submit the correct screenshot, that you know exactly what it is that I keep asking about. So in the picture that you look at, that is the marketplace program, right? We've already done the green and orange building, the blue and white building. The startup to IPO is the tall green building. The shorter building next to it, I don't know if you would call that red or orange. It's kind of this weird mixture, but that building is the keys to investment lesson. This one right next to the tall green one, that's our next one. And then finally, this little, I don't know, schoolhouse looking thing in the front is the investment game. Okay. So those are the last two that we'll be finishing up next week in the marketplace program, right? It's a course. That EverFi is an overarching thing. You have 3 squares, 3 classes, 3 programs, 3 courses, however you want to call it, within the EverFi domain. And so we'll be finishing those up. Now, for every EverFi we've done and every EverFi we are going to be doing, when you click on the lesson, so you click on the building, you go through and you watch videos, you answer questions, etc. And then at the very end of every lesson is your 10-question assessment. And so you have to answer that. And the goal is to get at least 7 out of the 10 correct. That's in EverFi, that's what they consider passing, right? Is 70%, 7 out of 10. And so you take it and you get the page that you see, this really large one right here on the right. This is what everybody sees. And I need that screenshot of your entire computer screen. I need to see what lesson that this assessment is coming from. So how do I know? Because the tab up here, this top little thing right there, it tells me what lesson you're working on. The URL doesn't always tell me which exact lesson that you're in. The tab shows me the lesson that this is the assessment grade 4. And then your name in the corner shows me that this is in fact your grade. That's why I keep saying I need all 3 of these, the tab, the assessment percentage, and your name. This is what, no matter what lesson it is, whether it's the startup to IPO, the keys to investment, the investing game, or any of the ones following, you should submit something that looks like the picture on the right on your screen. Okay. Are there any questions in regards to what I mean about the EverFi? Anybody? You can unmute or you can type in the chat. Or if you feel like you get it, can you give me the thumbs up? I see Makai feels like he's gotten it. What about the rest of you guys? I need some responses from you so that I know that we're all on the same page, please. Okay, I see Symphony. Okay, America. Mr. Star, what about you? Do you feel like you've got it? Or Kayla? Or Dagan? Okay, good. All right. So I just want to make sure, okay? And if you are unsure, that's kind of what we're doing today. Because remember I said you would have a makeup day, a catch-up day. All right, so let's turn to the Standard of Living Research Project. So Monday and Wednesday, we went through tasks 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. You were supposed to pick indicators to help you figure out what the standard of living for your country is, because we know GDP per capita alone is not enough. What I have been getting, though, from some students, and I can't tell you, like, it's not like it's only one class or one student, it's just kind of all over, is I look at the chart and I'm seeing things like maybe land area. And I am unsure how land area of a country would help you figure out the standard of living. I'm unsure of that. And there's nothing in the chart or in the answers that actually explains why. Okay. Or, so GDP per capita for your developed country, say it's $32,000, meaning we know $32,000 is $32,000 a year on average, right? And then say for your developing country, it's $12,000. And for your underdeveloped, it's, $2,000. Okay. That's relatively, we've talked about it a lot. We kind of get, that's our average GDP per capita per year. And then you tell me like where, like that's for 2021 or 2022, right? But then the other items just have like random numbers. And there's no explanation for what those numbers mean. So just picking your indicators, but with no further explanation, then, you have something here, like, land area, and then it just gives land area. I don't understand how that helps you figure that out. Or here you picked, like level of education. And then over here, you put 6. And I'm not sure, and guys, I'm just being very general here. I'm not sure what that 6 means. Do you mean what percentage of people only go to what we would consider the 6th grade? Is that what you mean? What are, and if only they go to the sixth grade, are there no people that go beyond that? It's like, so if you're going to do level of education, I need to know those levels, right? How many go to this point? How many go to this point? And do you have people that have gone on to, college, etc.? Because we talked about brain drain, right? The really smart people, really educated people leaving a country. Okay. If you're putting literacy rates, I need to see that in a percentage, right? So if the literacy rate is 88%, then I need to see 88%, not just 88. Because then I am unsure if you understand what you're putting, because these numbers and these facts, these figures that you're putting in your chart are going to help you decide who has a higher standard of living. And this may surprise you, but some developing nations don't have as high of a standard of living as some of, like we think they should. Some have higher than we think they would. Even some of our underdeveloped have a higher standard of living than we would assume that they would. So I need you guys to not just put numbers in these boxes, but some explanation. And that is because when you come down to here and you start answering those questions, you need to be able to explain it. So like question number 5 actually has 3 parts to it, right? What country has the highest standard of living? Give me a sentence. What country has the lowest standard of living? Give me a sentence. And then why? Why do they have those levels? Okay. The indicators you chose, do you think they were helpful in measuring standard of living? And I know I keep picking on this this one, and it was just one that just really kind of stuck out to me. They said they thought the land, the measurement of the land that a country had was helpful because it let them know how much space a country had. And I'm not understanding or not seeing how that's helping the standard of living. And there was no other explanation. Okay. Was there anything surprising in your findings? I did have some good answers in regards to that. So that's good. And then besides GDP per capita, right? Because we've gone through a couple of videos. We've talked about how that's kind of this average and it really doesn't show you specifically what people are making. And that could be an indicator you look at. Well, GDP per capita says this country's, GDP per capita is 38,000. But when I look at total, or income inequality or whatever, I can tell that 1% makes this much money and maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7% makes what that GDP per capita says, and then the rest make lower. Okay. So what other indicators besides just that average amount do you think would help you? Right. And then of course, which each and every one of them, I'm asking you to explain. Okay. Do we have any questions in regards to like what I was just talking about? Anything you want me to, anything I just said or anything you want me to clarify? Or I can try and explain it differently. Okay, so let's go back. All right, so whatever you have not completed on your standard of living project, that's what you're going to do today, since I'm right here so you can ask me questions. And you should be able to get that turned in today. So that's one less thing you have to worry about. It's a summative. Make sure you double check with the rubric like we went over yesterday. And then those of you who have turned in your standard of living research projects, please go back and look at what grade you made. Please double check now while you are with me to make sure that you are not somebody who got a minimum F because I couldn't understand what you were putting in there, or that you got less than what you think you got. Like now is the time to do that. And then if you did your standard of living research project and you got a good grade on it, maybe you need to go and finish some of those other items that are still open to help bring up those grades. Okay. Can somebody, either through unmuting on their microphone or typing in the chat, can somebody repeat back to me what it is I'm asking you guys to do right now? And I'm asking this because I want to make sure that we're all understanding what it is that I'm asking you guys to do. Yeah, complete your project, review if it's done. Obviously, Chris, right? If you didn't get a good grade, fix whatever it is and resubmit. All right, so that is what you guys are supposed to be working on now. So you're just going to hang with me and work on that. Okay. William, what did you need me to go over? Was there something in particular you needed me to go over? Or did I actually cover it when I was talking about the project? All right, so while you guys are working, just a reminder that there is no school tomorrow, so there will be no small groups tomorrow. And there's no school on Monday. Okay, so no actual classes on Monday, so we get a 4-day weekend. There will be small groups on Tuesday. So from 12:30 to 2:30 on Tuesday afternoon, MVLA Rather SSG is our small group. Yes, I will send a reminder text, and yes, there will be an announcement. But this is like from here, if you don't come to small groups, then the next time that I'll actually get to see you guys will be next Wednesday. So almost a week. Okay. All right. Is everybody okay then if I stop the recording now while you guys are working? I think that's what I'm going to do. That way, yeah, people who come back to watch the recording aren't just looking at me staring at you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.